Welcome to the Business of Sound. We're excited to have all our listeners and viewers here today, and we actually have a very special episode for you. As a reminder, we're obviously here every Thursday. We want this show to be actionable, something that you not only enjoy, but hopefully learn from. So whether you're a storyteller, a marketing executive, or even an investor who is trying to learn more about podcasting, the Business of Sound is the show for you. On today's episode, I have Nick Castner, our head of marketing, and he has a really special format and some amazing guests that I'm really excited for him to tell more about. So I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, David. In the hot seat with the CEO. So always a pleasure to be here with you. So we're recording this intro at Foxgrove Studios. It's a music studio right by our office in Soho. And where Jay-Z, Travis Scott have all recorded here. And then we're leaving here to record my interview with Lauren and Arielle at Spotify. So it's a day full of culture and just very, very fun locations to be filming. But yes, the interview that literally Eric and I are hopping on the subway right after this to travel to Spotify is with Lauren Passell and Arielle Nissenblatt. And as I will start the interview with here in about an hour or so, I've followed their work for quite some time, and they literally wrote the textbook on podcast marketing. So through my transition to New York and just networking more in the New York podcast scene, I have developed a close friendship with both of them. David, I've been in conversations with you where both of these names, continue to come up, whether we're talking to podcasters, media buyers, folks across the industry. So I am, I'm looking forward to them sharing insights with our audience here.
I think you already explained it pretty well, but we're always talking to amazing people, whether it's like founders or people that are in the industry. Why them in particular?
Yeah, and especially right now too. So the podcast marketing, almost all of the tactics are focused to target the people who already listen to podcasts and get them to listen to your show or more shows. And they did a campaign, the first ever Adopt a Listener month in the month of April. And the hope of this campaign that we collaborated with them on was to encourage listeners to encourage podcast listeners to bring more people into the space and get more people to listen to their very first podcast. So yes, we collaborated and connected them with, I think, about 10 of our hosts and delivered millions of impressions for this first ever Adopt a Listener month. And like I said, it was in the month of April, so it just closed. And
amazing.
Yeah. This seemed as good of a time as any to bring them on.
Yeah, they're giants in the space. I'm excited that you're doing that. So I'm definitely looking forward to listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope you enjoy the conversation. Massive shout out to Spotify Studios for letting us record this conversation in their office. Cannot thank them enough. And I'm going to start this interview on a personal anecdote here. I recently moved to New York from Nebraska. Started podcasting, working with my local newspaper in Nebraska. Ended up starting a production house bought up by my previous employer. But in Nebraska, there's not much. The podcasting scene is pretty light, to say the least. So throughout my time in podcasting, I would go online and research other thought leaders in the podcast marketing space, and have followed Lauren and Arielle's work for quite some time, for years. So when I moved to New York and started going this sounds profitable event and meeting you all in person, it was I at first was starstruck, but yes, just cannot hype both of you two up enough. So our guests today are Lauren Passell, the CEO and founder of Tink Media, which is a podcast growth marketing firm, and Arielle Nissenblatt is a consultant at Tink, along with head of community at Squadcast and host of the Trailer Park podcast. Both of you two, thank you so much for joining me today.
What a blast, Nick. Thanks for having us.
That was so nice to hear. I didn't know that you knew who we were.
Yeah, and specifically, you're the podcast marketing magic newsletter, which Lauren writes, and then Arielle's Twitter. Those were.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
We like to hear it.
Yes, I was a follower before it was trendy.
That is a huge compliment. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, of course. So now that, like the audience knows, I, of course, am very familiar with your work and how you all landed in podcasting. But I think to start, both of you two, if you could provide a quick background in how you landed in the podcast space.
Should I do mine or yours?
Sometimes we switch and we do each other's origin stories, but I feel like for this one, Lauren should do hers and Arielle should do hers.
Okay.
Well, I have a background in book publishing. I wasn't on the publicity team or the marketing team, but I loved podcasts. I had a podcast called Podcast about podcasts that you can probably still find somewhere. It exists. And so the PR team would come to me and ask me to get the authors on podcasts to promote their books. So that it all started there. I left there to work for a podcast company, and then I started Tink, which was initially just for authors. I would help authors get on podcasts to talk about their podcasts. But the more I started talking to these podcasters, I realized they need marketing help. So that is how the company started. And then I was working on a really big project, and Arielle, hardly knew who I was. We had met briefly.
I definitely knew who you were. She always says this, and I've been following her for a long time too.
We weren't
best friends.
It was a little unusual though that I called you and said, "Hi, I have a big problem. You're the only one who can help me. Can you help me?" And you said yes, and we started working together that day. That was 2.5 years ago, and we have been having so much fun ever since.
What was the problem that you had to call her?
It wasn't necessarily a problem. It was just
it was an opportunity.
Okay.
Yes.
Way to frame it.
Yes, it was a big
client with a lot of shows.
And I thought, I cannot do this on my own. I had been doing everything my own. And I was like, who knows how to do this stuff? Nobody. Thank God for you.
And now your team is up to eight.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, it's wild.
Yes.
I'm obsessed with all of them. Arielle's always like, you have to stop telling them you love them so much. You're going to get in trouble with HR. We don't have an HR.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So, Arielle, how about you? How did you land in the podcast space?
Listener first. I loved listening to podcasts and really wanted to work in podcasting. I really feel like you could do my story and I could do yours. Anyway, I try to change it up every once in a while, challenge myself to do a little bit of improv.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've been working in the podcast space since 2017, but 2016 was when I was like, I would love to do anything to work in this space. I was a listener first, and I wanted to work in production, but it was really, really hard to get a job as an apprentice or as an intern if you didn't have prior experience. So I thought, what are some other ways that I could potentially get in? And I thought, what if I start my own thing that makes it so that people have to talk to me? So I started Earbuds Podcast Collective in 2017, which is a newsletter that I still run to this day. And the way it works is that each week is curated by a different person. Anyone can curate a list, but you have to submit a list in order to potentially get featured. And podcasters can include one of their own podcasts. So I used it as a way for people to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd love to get my podcast featured. And I'd say, great, you need to subscribe to the newsletter. And if I wanted somebody to curate a list that I wanted to be in touch with, I would reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to curate a list for me? And over time, I continued to listen to more podcasts because now these lists were being curated for me. And I also started meeting people. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and every time somebody would come across my inbox, I'd be like, hey, any chance you're in LA and would like me to buy you a coffee so that I can learn about how you got to where you are today? And then those just built up, and I started getting more entrepreneurial, and I had the idea that there should be co-working spaces with podcast elements to them. So I pitched that idea to a bunch of different spaces and ended up managing a podcast studio in a co-working space for like a year and a half. And I held networking events and met more people, and it all compounded while I was running this newsletter to get me full-time jobs and to meet people and to just like really do it, you know?
Yeah.
I love it. It's very easy. People are like, how are you so busy? They say this to Lauren and I all the time. How do you do it? And we're like, 'cause we love it. It's actually really easy if you love it. And I can say that because I've hated jobs before and it's been hard.
Yes, I have the same exact feeling about working in podcasting. Of like, I am excited to work hard every day because I love just the space industry, everything.
It's like electric.
Yeah. Yes. So I do have my main like career question for you, Arielle, is it does seem you have like 6 full-time jobs. How do you just like from there's only so many hours in the day perspective?
So I have Squadcast as my full-time job. I do 40 hours a week, sometimes
Okay.
more. And then Lauren and I work in the morning, in the evening, in the weekend. But genuinely, it doesn't really, I'm not going to say it doesn't feel like work. I'm not that much of a capitalist, but I do love working. I do love meeting with clients. And then I have somebody help me with my newsletter. Her name is Devin. She's great.
Okay.
And then I have a few other like consulting things that I do. I co-host a few podcasts, but those all sort of fall into the work that I do for Squadcast because I'm using Squadcast when I record. So it's, it all kind of folds together like that.
Okay.
The hours work out somehow.
I feel like at any given time, one of us is awake. Like
I think
Arielle
that's
stays up later and I wake up really early. So we've got the whole day covered, 24 hours, basically.
Yeah.
All hours of the clock. Well, yes, it's
Podcast
impressive.
coverage.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And especially podcasting is so democratized that I'm sure similar to your clients, but our podcasters at Glassbox are scattered every corner of around the globe. So the time zone can be a challenge sometimes thinking through scheduling meetings and all that stuff. Yes. So we reached out and brought you all on now just because we just wrapped up the first ever Adopt a Listener month that Tink, it was Tink's idea that Glassbox, was happy to get behind and collaborate. And I recorded an intro to this conversation with David, our CEO, before this. So I gave a brief overview of Adopt a Listener month and how it was to encourage podcast listeners to help champion the space as well. How did that idea come to fruition as I'm talking to the two two people who it was their kind of brainchild?
I think I was thinking about how pods, Love It or Leave It, the Crooked Media did the adoptive voter.
Yes.
And then I feel like I brought it up at a podcast therapy, and then I started talking to everybody about it, and I thought it would be an idea.
What is podcast therapy?
Sorry. I brought it up at a Tink Talk.
Ooh.
Tink Talk is just when we all talk about business. The Tink team comes together to talk about business, and we usually reserve 5 minutes to talk about business and 55 minutes to talk about fun things. And I had floated this idea, and I feel like I was like, they're either going to be like, next, Lauren, that's stupid, or get totally on it. And everyone got totally on it, and within minutes, there was a plan, and Arielle was like, we can do driving the car. Everyone had their own idea of how they would push this. And at Tink, we're always like, we need to have one project at all times that takes up tons of time and makes us no money, but is super fun. And that was what this was going to be. And it made, I think everyone had so much fun doing it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, what was your thinking about?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of podcasters at every stage. Some have hundreds of thousands of listeners per episode. Some have 10 and they want to get to 20. And for all of them, we employ a certain number of tactics to grow their show, and we can talk about that another time. But we also think that there just needs to be more podcast listeners, more people who are obsessed with being entertained by ear entertainment, right? People who just want to press play and hear something for entertainment. And so Lauren and I are not the norm. We understand this. We listen to 5 to 7 hours of podcasts every day, even more sometimes. And we've realized over the past few months that that's not what most people do. And we're not asking for most people to do that, but we do think that people who listen to 1 or 2 podcasts could easily listen to 3 or 4 podcasts. But the people who are at 0, how do we get them to go to 1? So that is something that we started thinking about late last year, and then started ideating on how to actually make it happen. What are the barriers in place that make somebody not want to listen? We started having these conversations with friends. We started having these conversations with family members, and then strangers relatively recently, and I'm sure we'll go into that.
Yes.
But I think all of this, it comes from the idea that we want to help our clients grow their listenership and find the perfect podcast listener for them, and then find we want to find listeners, and then we want to find podcasts, and we want to pair those people together and make them obsessed with podcasts. And again, not as much as we are, but a little bit.
Yes, yeah. And so you two recently recorded an episode of the Sounds Profitable podcast. So listeners of this show should definitely check out that feed. It's top notch. But on it, you all talked about to be a super listener of podcasts, someone needs to consume 5 hours a week. And the analogy you gave for different mediums, like say for television, if someone said they consumed 5 hours of television a week, I would not think of that as like a super television consumer. So yeah, there is like certainly room to bring people in and grow the numbers just by getting people to go from zero to one. Part of this campaign and initiative, we all went to Washington Square Park together to do some man and women on the street, primarily women on the street, videos
And
of
tall man on the street.
yes, and tall man with a sign ushering people our way, and just with intent of just asking people about their listening habits. Very fun. It was fun to just collaborate and hang out with you all for a Monday afternoon. What were some of the big learnings from going out and talking with people?
I mean, the number one thing is, when I dreamed of this day, I thought that we'd be giving recommendations because that's what we love doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd be like, oh, you love gardening? We know these great gardening podcasts for you or whatever.
And they would skip off on their merry way
and they'd be like,
press
I
play.
love gardening. Do I love podcasts? Yes, I do. And we would just be giving people the perfect recommendation for them. It ended up being more of a podcast awareness day where maybe someone saw the word podcast for the third time in their life, and that's great. There was a woman who literally she had no idea what a podcast was at all, and we were kind of trying to show her on her phone, and she thought we were downloading, buying things on her phone, and she ran away. She was like, these are not free. We were like, yes, they are. So there was that level of people. So I think I was the most surprised about how much we would be learning. I thought that we would be teaching people something, but really they taught us something.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think it was interesting. Just to set the scene, we were in Washington Square Park. There's a fountain in the middle of the park, and then people.
There were skateboarders
Yes.
everywhere. It was.
They've since filled it in. Now it's a fountain.
They were stealing the thunder, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it was this was early April, so they hadn't yet turned on the fountain, so people use it to skateboard, just for those out-of-towners.
Yeah, it's also close to NYU's campus,
Yes.
which is not something I consider. That we were chatting with a lot of college students.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very chaotic area for non-New York people. That there's literally people selling marijuana and music, singing, literally in this one
devil's
square block.
Bibles.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were competing with Bible salespeople. So
Yeah,
that was interesting.
yes, literally everything.
So I would say the majority of people who came up to us were either NYU students or students who were visiting, student age people who were visiting because it was spring break for a lot of folks, out-of-towners in general because it was spring break, some younger, some older. And then a lot of content creators, a lot of people who hang out around Washington Square Park with a GoPro, hoping to do man on the street interviews or capture, people being like, how much money do you make?
That was
that
a
kind of thing.
huge surprise.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
There was
And
someone
then-
who was just screaming the word content in our face, and we were like, we don't know what you're doing.
And then there was one guy with a tarantula. So just to set the scene, it was chaotic. And then, there were some families who came up to us who did have podcast listening experience for them and then also for their kids. So that was surprising. But I think, when we asked people if they listened to podcasts and they came over to us to talk about that, the conversations were not brief. They were at least 3 minutes long. So that was surprising. It wasn't like, hi, do you listen to podcasts? Yes. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
It was people who saw the word podcast wanted to talk to us about the podcast that they love.
Yeah, every once in a while, someone would march up, and you could see the look in their eye. It was like they were, and the person that talked to us the longest wasn't someone who wanted to talk It wasn't someone that wanted to talk about podcasts. They just wanted to talk to Nick. So
yeah.
that was the person that actually stayed the longest.
That guy did not care at all about
Yes.
podcasts.
Yeah. He was quite friendly to me.
Yes.
Quite friendly to me.
You made a new friend.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, he was.
He was a YouTube creator, though.
He was a YouTube,
say
which
that.
is what we. And then the conversation got like very super deep all of a sudden. It was a funny exchange. And what was also interesting about that exchange, his father was there, and that's how he was like, the father was in from out of town. His son was a YouTuber, so he was like, podcasts, YouTube's like similar thing, and that's kind of how the conversation started. And then his son came up, but I was like, to the dad, do you listen to any podcasts? And this is maybe like I'm bad at guessing people's age, but maybe like a 70-year-old
I think
man.
he was 70. Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I was going to say that.
Yeah,
too.
thank you for backing me up on that. A 70-year-old man, he's like, I have flat out never listened to a podcast. I really don't know what it is. And then I started talking to him, and then he was a regular listener of Lex Friedman's podcast. And
Watcher, I guess he meant.
yeah, and I just thought it was interesting. He went from not knowing one, but then realizing something he consumed on a weekly basis is a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then my kind of other note on this, it's very, especially from like the perspectives we all hold in like our professional environment, it's really easy to like see numbers on a screen and disconnect yourself with the people you're reaching. And that was a big takeaway for me of just like being out there and talking to people about their listening habits, how they find shows, what they like about those shows is just very, very valuable.
Yeah. Everybody mentioned Spotify. Shout out to Spotify. Thanks for letting us record here.
Yes.
Spotify and YouTube, huge sources of where people start to listen to shows. Nobody mentioned Apple. Nobody would dream of mentioning Pocket Casts or Castbox. It really was YouTube and Spotify.
And we afterwards, one of like we had a little like recap call and discussed about like if we change locations, I wonder how much different. Like we also had a lot of Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan suggestions, so many, and like a lot of this similar podcasts kept on being brought up. That I especially the Spotify, it seems to be like a younger demo, and like us mainly talking to college students or college aged people, and then content creators. It's skewing Spotify. I guess isn't that surprising in hindsight, but I would not have been able to
I did not
guess
predict that.
beforehand.
Yeah, I think we should go to a farmer's market.
In Brooklyn.
Yeah.
We'll hear some Pocket Casts then.
But I must say, one of my favorite things about the day, completely unrelated to podcast, it was like the most New Yorky day I've ever had. And I've lived here for 18 years. It was just a beautiful day in the park where when do you spend the entire day in a park? Like it was a really, really fun day. So thank you so much for being there.
Oh yes, it was
Not
fun.
nearly as many people would have seen us if it were not for your long arms.
Yeah, we needed that.
And the sign.
We really did.
Yes.
Otherwise, Lauren and I looked way too eager.
We were too eager. We were screaming. Are you listening to a podcast right now? To everyone that was wearing headphones, but Arielle just started screaming at everyone, even if they weren't wearing headphones.
I was like on autopilot at that point.
We were losing it towards the end.
Yeah.
We really were. It was getting a little nuts.
Yes. Battery drained. So did either of you two adopt a listener for Adopt a Listener Month?
I have. I attempted one. Her
Same
name is
here.
Kate.
Okay.
Her name is Kate Later. Kate, the podcast hater later. She hates podcasts. Okay, so I'm like trying to convert her. I gave her a new episode based on what I thought she liked. She'd give me feedback. I'd give her more. This was a humongous. I really, really, really was trying to find her something. And after about 3 weeks, she said, "I'm done."
Wow.
Ouch,
Just like that.
Harsh. Hey, the woman knows what she wants. So
and she she's anti-podcast. It sounds like, or is
yes,
just like
she
okay.
doesn't like to hear people talk. Like it's. See, I'm learning with her because I didn't even know it was possible to hate the things that she hates or like the level of which, like, she doesn't like hearing people talk at her. Actually, it's very funny. There's one podcast she liked. So I guess I did convert her because it's called Miss Pam's Baby Talk for Babies.
Something like
Something
that.
like that. Because she has a
Small talk, baby talk.
Small Talk
Oh,
Baby Talk.
okay.
It was a
Yeah.
client of ours. Her name is Miss Pam, and it's a podcast for babies. And it's just
I think it's the first 1,000 days of life is how she builds it.
Okay.
and it's basically Miss Pam reading things like peanut butter, marmalade, and jam. It's for babies. Okay, so that's the
Okay.
only podcast she likes because it's useful for her. She plays it for her baby, and her baby comes down. So
Yeah.
she's not like looking for that kind of. I tried real hard.
She's
is what I'm
using
saying.
podcasts for
Something
a
else.
utility, not so much for
Yes.
entertainment,
Yes,
which is a
That
use
is
case that I'm
something.
okay with.
And counts. Like we talk
Yeah.
about co-listening in Glassbox a lot, like, family-centered shows where like the parents and kids can enjoy it together. And that kind of is like a co-listening that I'm sure your friend still like hears it even though.
This is kind of huge for me. I was feeling like I failed.
Yeah, I
And
think
were
you
telling me,
passed. Yeah.
A+.
I did it.
You did
I
do
adopted
it.
a listener.
Pound it. Pound it.
I didn't.
Yeah, nice.
I am really happy right now. I really thought that was a failure, but you're right. That
Yes.
counts.
Definitely
And
W.
now we just have to set up promos on Miss Pam's show for other
Mm-hmm.
podcasts. Okay.
Get her.
The
Really
work is not
hook her
done. The
in.
work is not done. The work is only
The
begun.
work is
Yes.
never done.
But I also am talking to my mother-in-law, who I think is actually much more likely to listen. So I'm working on
Okay.
her. I sent her a list of certain episodes. Anyway, what about you, Arielle?
I converted a bunch of people to at least one episode, and I do think that it's going to continue. So I was a guest on one of the biggest Jewish podcasts. Last month was when we recorded in person. It was like my first in-person recording in a really long time. So I really like this because I work for Squadcast, which is so remote.
Remote,
Anyway,
What's the name of the Jewish podcast you're on?
it's called Unorthodox.
Okay.
And it's actually a really great show. It has different segments. They have the Jew of the week. They have the Gentile of the week. So I was the Jew of the week. And
You were awesome.
It was great. It was like it was one of my best interviews. Credit to the hosts. They,
Wow.
pulled a lot out of me. And apparently this is a really well-known show in the Jewish world. And so I posted about it, and I've had people reach out to me from all over, either people that already listened to Unorthodox or people who saw that I posted about it and listened because I posted about it. And now they are going to be listeners of this show. It's really good. So, yeah,
Okay.
I didn't have them fill out the form, which you can find at tinkmedia.co/adopt. So if you
Okay.
do successfully convert somebody, please do pick up an adoption certificate.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I get to fill out the form.
Yes, you do.
The form that Devin made. Okay.
Yes.
Sweet.
I failed in this. I was trying to get my
No,
mom.
It's not over.
At
At the time of our recording,
that
it's
is
not
true.
over.
That is true. I'm trying to get my mom to listen to podcasts, and so the 2 episodes I sent is first just normal gossip, the entire feed.
I was listening on the way over here.
Yes, it's such a fun podcast, especially for like my mom's demo of like if you've ever sat around at like a kitchen table drinking wine and gossiped, you're gonna love normal gossip. So that's just my like go-to rec for like kind of anyone, but I think my mom in particular would love that show. And then there was a This American Life episode that kind of like sort of illustrated one of the stories shared in this episode paralleled something my mom was going through. I was like, all right, I think this specific one. And she's such a radio person, like, that
She seems perfect.
exactly. And but because I was doing the whole like I trying to ask prying questions, and her comment was she likes that radio just starts when she gets in the car.
Wow.
And doesn't want to like find something like it's just
Interesting.
another thing to do.
There are so many reasons for
you-
somebody to drop off our.
Can't you
Yeah.
do a "Don't You Love Me, Mom" card?
Yeah, and so I started, and I wish I would have gotten this on tape. That they say always be recording. This is a
Yeah.
moment I missed because I was like, Mom, like why don't you listen to podcasts? She's like, well, whenever I do, it's out of obligation to you. I was I was like, well, Mom, I have something for you. Adopt a listener. And trying that. We've had some family dynamics where my adopt a listener month will trickle into May.
Thank
so
you.
yes,
Good.
Never
yes.
stop fighting.
not
Never
over.
stop.
No,
Yeah.
it's not
Yes.
over.
Never stop.
I
Yeah.
think when it comes to parents, the obligation thing is definitely real. I really try to get my dad every single time I see him. He'll go, "How is podcast going?" Like he doesn't even understand the terminology. And he also he can't hear very well, so he's not ideal. I don't think I'll be adopting him, but I do think that the stories within he would love. Like he
Yes.
loves niche minor league baseball team stories, and like ESPN's 30 for 30 does that.
Yeah.
It would be perfect for him.
Not to brag, but my parents are Not to brag, but my parents are podcast addicts.
Yeah, they
I can't even
Wow.
say it. They're addicted to podcasts. Yes.
Like what shows?
My mom loves Family Secrets and Risk and
Feed
I mean-
the Q. Does she listen to Feed the Q?
no, she doesn't listen to my podcast.
Called Feed the Q. Is that the name?
My
of it?
podcast is called Feed the Q.
Okay.
And all it is episodes of shows that I like, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad loves Mark Maron. I think he should start a podcast summing up Mark
love that
Maron
idea.
because
With my mom, who also loves Mark Maron.
see, that'd be cute. My dad loves all of the Ringer podcasts, which
Okay.
are really good.
I'm a big fan of the rewatchables.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad. fucks me with that. My dad loves Neil Brennan. Okay, Neil Brennan has had 2 podcasts. The first one was bad. My dad loved it. And now Neil Brennan has a new podcast, which is, you can tell he's trying. It's like actually a good show. So I'm like really happy that my dad is now listening to a better Neil Brennan show. But I don't know. We talk about podcasts every single week. They read my newsletter. I absolutely love it. My mom was on Jim Harold's Campfire. She actually has a ghost story. So she was telling her ghost story.
You also have that ghost story.
I'm in the
You're
ghost
part
story.
of that.
Yeah. So she was telling the ghost story. And of course, she's a mom. So she's like, Jim, my daughter has a podcast growth company. And he's like, really? And she was like, you should talk to her. So I talked to Jim, and Jim has been a client for like 2 years.
Wow.
And I love
Your
him.
mom gets us a lot of business.
That is hilarious.
I love Jim Harold. Yeah.
That is so funny. What are common podcasts? So to kind of cue this up, Tom Webster from Sounds Profitable gave, I think, you all's advice, but it was published someplace on like the 5 things when you're recommending podcasts that will to actually make it stick and bring people in. And one of them was like don't get cute, don't get like too niche. Give them the best of the podcast industry. That said, what are some of your like best of the best, like most commonly recommended podcasts?
We spoke with Tom in, I want to say February, leading up to Adopt a Listener Month, to be like, how should we frame our questions, in terms of methodology, in terms of surveying? How should we ask people what they listen to in order to elicit the best answers or the most, complete survey data, even though we weren't doing an official survey. So, and we were also like, how do we effectively adopt listeners? And so, yeah, you're right. He said to us, I think the temptation is to say, oh, you like gardening? You should listen to Planthropology by Vikram Baliga, who is a teacher at the University of North Texas. Shout out to Vikram, by the way. That's a real podcast. But Tom was like, don't do that. Instead, recommend an episode of This American Life that talks about plants. Recommend an episode of The Moth where somebody is in love with plants. So it's really the best of the best is what we think is really going to convert people. It's what converted us. It's what converted me initially. Is I listened to 99% Invisible, This American Life, Radio Lab, Invisibilia, shows like that that really are so beautifully produced and they just grab you.
Yeah, same. I tried recommending things to my mom forever. It took years to convert my parents, not a month. So hang in there. Nick.
Okay, thank you. I'm changing topics slightly.
No.
Yes. So,
Do you want to talk about podcast recommendations more? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. Well, you both
You're
have
the leader,
newsletters. Yeah, you both have newsletters that for ongoing recommendations. So you both are out like constantly talking to creators in both of your like full time or throughout your professional lives, always talking to podcast creators. And I'm interested, how like in journalism, there's a concept of like if a journalist talks to like 20 people, they can and sees common trends, like that journalist is able to like speak on behalf of all the group. So and I feel like you all like can have some consensus about like how podcast creators are thinking, feeling today like in the industry and the like where the kind of like direction is headed from a creator point of view. So like with that kind of like preamble, did anything specific, like how are podcasters thinking, feeling, acting at this moment in the media landscape?
I think I have noticed that, I don't know, podcasters are a little nervous.
I'm finding that a lot of independent podcasters don't give, can I curse?
I think so. Yes.
I'll say don't give a crud. They don't give a shit about the perceived economic downturn or the economic downturn. What I'm finding, let me finish, Lauren.
Oh, sorry.
What I'm finding is that we know a lot of podcasters who don't rely on working with a network. So they sell their own ads and they are continuing to be able to sell their own ads, or they want to continue no matter what because this is something that's adding to their portfolio. I was speaking with somebody recently about this. They called me a portfolio entrepreneur, which means that I do a lot of things that contribute to my portfolio and I don't necessarily care that they're not all making me money all the time because they are adding to this perception of me as somebody in the podcast industry. Okay. And I think a lot of podcasters see themselves that way too. They make a podcast because it lets them speak to people in their industry. It allows them to practice their public speaking skills. It allows them to, many other things. And they're just sort of betting on this idea that over time, they will be able to grow their show or convert it into a course or monetize their blog or whatever it is. But I think a lot of the podcasters that I talk to, yes, maybe in the past, whereas an iHeartRadio might have given them $40,000 to make a season, that's not happening now, but they're still going to continue making their shows because they believe in the portfolio of what they're doing. Not everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them have said to me, should I be worried? So I'm not even sure if they're worried, but they're aware that they've heard about people being worried and they wonder if it applies
That
to
causes
them.
worry.
Yeah,
Yes. So that's what I mean. But and I'm always telling them no, and especially these indies, they've been making shows for a long time, and they will continue to do it, and they continue to make good stuff because they absolutely love it. If you're making something because you absolutely love it, you're in great shape.
Yeah, but by far the number one question is, I think my show is really great. I work really hard on it. Why is it not growing?
Yeah, that's a phrase we hear a lot.
Like twice a day,
I'm
at least.
plateauing. My numbers should be higher. That's what
I
everybody
deserve.
says. Yeah.
And that's, again, it all kind of comes back to adopt a listener is let's get more people to listen to podcasts so that we can match you, a creator, with the perfect listener who's going to evangelize your show so that more people will find it so that you as a creator can get paid so that you can keep doing this.
Yeah. Yes, and something we've talked on is also having the right expectations of like developing an audience that can make podcasting a full-time job is very difficult and takes a lot of time and so much work.
Yes. I want everyone to know it takes time. When you look at those people that have, so many downloads, they've probably been doing it for a really long time. And even if before they got on the mic were doing the work, it takes so much time.
Or they got really lucky or had the right keywords, but most people are going to have to put the time in and innovate and ideate and change.
It is not a sprint. It is not a sprint. I forget that sometimes when we get a new client. I want to do everything in one day. It is the people that are in it for a sprint, I think, should think about something else.
The best hack is doing something consistently for 5 years. It's not a hack.
Yeah. Yes, and especially on the marketing front, as the marketing director, I get asked like, "Oh, what's like the new hack thing you're using to grow?" It's like it's the same thing that you all are doing that everyone is talking about. Like it's ad swaps appearing on other shows.
It's all of those things
at
at the same time, constantly.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
You just have to be the best forever.
One thing at Glassbox, especially like over the last 6 months, there's been headlines that has caused that like pandemic toilet paper effect where we weren't actually running out of toilet paper, but like everyone thought we were running out of toilet paper, so everyone stockpiled, and then all of a sudden we're out of toilet paper.
Wow.
I feel like this
Good way to put it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a similar analogy where like everyone's talking about like this pending economic downturn. Where it's like, well, is it pending? Because it's now been pending for 18 months. Arielle just hit her head on the microphone, so we're good. But what makes both of you two optimistic about the space?
I think people that are making good podcasts, the people that really, really, really love audio and that really, really want to make something good are going to keep on doing it. They're going to keep on doing it. And nothing's going to stop them from making good stuff. So I think the craft will just keep on getting better and better and include more and more voices, and people, all this new technology will get smarter and smarter. The other thing that just makes me excited is that like it's moving so fast. There's something that's exciting and new. I feel like every single day. I get excited every morning to look at my feed to see who has created something new and what's in my feed that's new. Literally, it's what gets me out of bed every day. So on a very basic level, just the exciting things that people are making every day. I don't really make podcasts. I help people with their podcasts. So I'm just sitting back and seeing the great things people are making, and that's what I'm excited about.
I generally don't love to point to celebrity examples, but this past few weeks, I've been really inspired by Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast and the demographic that it's serving, but also the demographic that it's meant to serve, and then the demographic that it's serving maybe not on purpose. So Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast, she's interviewing people above the age of 70, I believe. And first of all, it's been #1 on Apple's charts for a long time, which I love. And James Cridland shares every day what's #1 on the different charts. And it's been really, really encouraging to see that there, because Sounds Profitable talks a lot about the underserved 54, or maybe it's 55 plus demographic. And I really do think that when more people realize that content should be made specifically for specific people, we're gonna see growth. And so I just really love that example, and shout out to Lemonada for capturing that.
Yeah. Also, that show.
It's good.
There's a lot of celebrity shows. That one feels like something that she wanted to
Yes.
make.
Yeah.
And she's
they
tweeting about it in theory voluntarily, and the tweets are getting traction, and it sounds like she wants to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different celebrity podcast than what we're used to seeing.
Yes, and wasn't Jane Fonda?
Yes,
recently?
first episode.
Yes, yeah. I heard someone yesterday. I was in conversation and they were raving about that specific episode.
Yeah.
So yes, certainly making waves in the podcast space. So where can our listeners follow you all, like on social media after this? Big note that if you are a podcaster looking to set up any collaboration opportunities on tinkmedia.co, there's a really good swap database, and that's always like when when I'm talking to small podcasters, they're like, "Oh, ad swaps, where to start?" It's like a 30-second trailer and go to your landing page.
Love that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. But where can our audience follow you all after this?
There's a bunch
Lauren
of
is at Lauren Passell on Twitter, at LaurenPassell. And her website is tinkmedia.co. And her email address, can I give you your email address?
Sure.
Lauren at
I don't get
tinkmedia.co.
enough emails.
Yeah.
And where else do you like to be followed? Oh, you have 2 newsletters. One is podcastmarketingmagic.substack.com. The other is podcastthenewsletter.substack.com. But if you search Lauren Passell on Google, maybe just search Lauren Passell podcast, you'll find everything you need.
Okay.
For Arielle, just search Podcast Queen.
Yeah.
And her photo will show up.
Literally, if you on some like free stock image sites,
Yes.
if you
Yeah.
search
I'm
podcast,
not
Arielle's
joking.
face
That's
pops up.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a real life
I want to
thing.
make more.
Yeah.
It's Arielle this and that on Twitter.
That's right. Oh, wait,
And
no, it's Ari. It's Ari.
Ari this and that.
Do you go by Ari ever, or is it only
You know what's
Arielle?
funny is my Twitter handle is Ari this and that, and I don't know why. I think it's because of space. I can't do Arielle this and that. It's too long. So I did Ari, and now people call me Ari. And honestly, I like it.
Okay.
But it's funny. It's like this perceived familiarity that people have with me. Like I've never introduced myself as Ari, but I'm down.
Yeah, okay.
And you can look up her newsletter and podcast, Feedback with Earbuds, that she was talking about earlier. And
My website is ariellenissenblatt.com
I
for all
didn't-
of that.
I didn't know you had a
Yeah.
website.
And I also bought
Why didn't you tell me
soundslikeThisandThat.com, and I plan to redirect it.
Nice. Amazing. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode of The Business of Sound. Another huge shout out to Spotify for letting us record at their studio here in Brooklyn. This show is produced by myself, Nick Castner, and Erica Miranda. New episodes come out every Thursday. Please support the show. Leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening. It helps with the algorithm. So yes, please tap the 5-star. Follow Glassbox Media on Instagram and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you back next week.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glassbox.